You hear about saints who performed miracles, who built orphanages, who changed the world through love. Almost nobody talks about what they saw when God pulled back the curtain on eternity. April 10th, 1868, Turin, Italy. A priest named John Bosco wakes up screaming. His hand is blistered, the skin peels off over the next 3 days. He touched the outer wall of hell. Not in his imagination, the physical burn proves it. This is not folklore. This is documented in his biographical memoirs compiled by Father Giovanni Battista Lemoyne between 1898 and 1939, cross-referenced with the saint's own handwritten notes from May 3rd, 1868, when he finally told his boys what he had seen. The focus? Young souls, boys from his oratory. What destroys them? What pleasure without penance actually costs? Giovanni Melchiorre Bosco, born August 16, 1815 in Becchi, a hamlet outside Turin in the Piedmont region of northern Italy. Father dead at age 2, raised by his mother Margherita in absolute poverty. At 9 years old, he has his first dream. A mysterious woman shows him boys turned into wild animals through vice. She tells him he will shepherd youth not with fists, but with gentleness. He becomes a street magician at age 10 to attract crowds, then preaches after the tricks. Ordained priest, June 5, 1841. Opens his first oratory for street boys in 1844 in the Valdocco district of Turin. By 1868, he is running multiple houses sheltering hundreds of abandoned youth. He knows their confessions, he knows which ones are lying, he knows which ones are eating snake flesh. If you value documented Catholic mysticism and hard factual history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from the original biographical memoirs, compiled by Father Lemoyne and authenticated by the diocesan process for beatification ordered by Pope Pius XI, alongside the complete text published by Catholicism.org in May 2008, which provides the unabridged account exactly as Don Bosco narrated it to his students on Sunday night, May 3, 1868, cross-checked against the scholarly analysis published in the Journal of Salesian Studies, Volume 2, Spring 1991, by Father Arthur Lenti. Now back to the information. He tells his assistant priests he feels more exhausted in the morning than if he had worked all night. A toothache torments him. Swollen legs, he postpones going to bed, sits at his desk until midnight browsing books, terrified of what awaits in sleep. On the night of April 17th, a giant toad appears trying to devour him. When it vanishes, a voice demands, "Why are you not telling them?" He sees a distinguished man by his bed, an angel perhaps, or his deceased spiritual director, St. Francis de Sales. The figure commands him to prepare for another dream the following night. Don Bosco spends April 18th in dread. When exhaustion finally forces him to bed that night, the same guide appears. "Get up and follow me." The priest protests. "Please leave me alone. I'm exhausted." The guide insists. "You have no time to lose." Yellowed, dried vegetation, no trees, no water, no souls. Don Bosco loses sight of his guide and panics. Then a road appears. Beautiful, wide, neatly paved, hedges on both sides covered in roses. It slopes downward so gently you barely notice, but Don Bosco glides forward effortlessly like wind carries him. He worries about the return trip. The guide reassures him. The Almighty wants you to go. He who leads you on will lead you back. As they continue the oratory, boys appear, hundreds of them. Many Don Bosco does not recognize. They walk behind him down this rose-lined road. Then boys start falling. Invisible forces drag them toward a distant furnace. Don Bosco asks, what makes these boys fall? They sprawl to the ground, then run headlong toward the abyss. The ground traps look like spider webs, barely visible, yet they snare every boy they touch. Don Bosco is astonished. He asks what this is. The guide answers, just plain human respect. Don Bosco picks up one trap and tugs. Resistance. He pulls harder. Instead of drawing the thread closer, he feels himself being pulled down. He stops resisting and finds himself at the mouth of a cave. He pulls the thread again. After great effort, a huge, hideous monster emerges, clutching a rope to which all traps are tied. The monster drags down anyone caught instantly. Don Bosco realizes he cannot match strength with this creature. He fights with the sign of the cross and short invocations. The guide confirms. "Now you know who he is," Don Bosco replies. "It is the devil himself. Sixth commandment. Theft, gluttony, sloth, anger." Don Bosco steps back to see which traps catch the most boys. 3 are linked together and capture the greatest number. Impurity, disobedience, pride. Many other traps harm boys, but not as devastatingly as these 3. Some boys run faster than others. Why such haste? The guide explains they are dragged by the snare of human respect. Don Bosco looks more closely and spots knives among the traps. A providential hand placed them there so boys can cut themselves free. The bigger knives symbolize meditation. Others represent spiritual reading done well. 2 swords, represent devotion to the Blessed Sacrament through frequent Holy Communion and devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. A hammer symbolizes confession. Other knives signify devotion to St. Joseph, St. Aloysius, and other saints. Through these means, quite a few boys free themselves or evade capture. He lies prostrate, catching his breath. The guide sometimes supports him or helps him rise. Panting, Don Bosco says, "My good fellow, my legs will not carry me another step. I just cannot go any farther." The guide responds sternly, "Now that we have come so far, do you want me to leave you here?" At this threat, Don Bosco wails, "How can I survive without your help?" The guide orders, "Then follow me." They continue descending. The road becomes so steep it is almost impossible to stand erect. At the bottom of this precipice, at the entrance of a dark valley, an enormous building looms. Its towering portal is tightly locked, facing their road. Don Bosco asks, "Where are we? What is this?" The guide tells him to read the inscription on the portal. Don Bosco looks up, "The place of no reprieve." He realizes they stand at the gates of hell. The guide leads him around this horrible place. At regular distances, bronze portals like the first overlook precipitous descents. Each bears an inscription. "Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, which was prepared for the devil and his angels." Matthew chapter 25, verse 41. Suddenly, the guide turns upset and startled. He motions Don Bosco to step aside. "Look." Don Bosco looks up in terror. In the distance, someone races down the path at uncontrollable speed. His disheveled hair partly stands upright, partly tosses back in the wind. His arms outstretched as though thrashing water trying to stay afloat. He wants to stop, but cannot. Tripping on protruding stones, he keeps falling even faster. Meanwhile, the youth turns his fiery gaze backward, trying to see if God's wrath still pursues him. The next moment he tumbles to the bottom of the ravine and crashes against the bronze portal as though he can find no better refuge in his flight. Don Bosco asks, why was he looking backward in terror? The guide answers, because God's wrath will pierce hell's gates to reach and torment him even in the midst of fire. As the boy crashes into the portal, it springs open with a roar. Instantly, 1,000 inner portals open with a deafening clamor, as if struck by a body propelled by an invisible, most violent, irresistible gale. As these bronze doors, one behind the other, though at considerable distance from each other, remain momentarily open, Don Bosco sees far into the distance something like furnace jaws, spouting fiery balls the moment the youth hurtles into it. As swiftly as they opened, the portals clang shut again. The three lads are sucked into that endless corridor amid a long-drawn, fading, infernal echo. Then the portals clang shut again. At intervals, many other lads come tumbling down. Don Bosco sees one unlucky boy pushed down the slope by an evil companion. Others fall singly, or with others arm in arm or side by side. Each bears the name of his sin on his forehead. Don Bosco keeps calling to them as they hurtle down, but they do not hear him. Again the portals open thunderously and slam shut with a rumble. Then dead silence. The guide exclaims, bad companions, bad books, and bad habits are mainly responsible for so many eternally lost. The guide replies this is their present state, and that is where they would go if they were to die now. Just then, a new group of boys comes hurtling down and the portals momentarily open. The guide says to Don Bosco, let us go in. Don Bosco pulls back in horror. The guide insists, come, you will learn much. They enter that narrow, horrible corridor and whiz through it with lightning speed. Threatening inscriptions shine eerily over all the inner gateways. The last one opens into a vast, grim courtyard with a large, unbelievably forbidding entrance at the far end. The guide says, from here on, no one may have a helpful companion, a comforting friend, a loving heart, a compassionate glance, or a benevolent word. All that is gone forever. Do you just want to see, or would you rather experience these things yourself? Don Bosco answers, I only want to see. The guide adds, then come with me. Ahead he sees something like an immense cave that gradually disappears into recesses, sunk far into the bowels of the mountains. They are all ablaze, but not an earthly fire, with leaping tongues of flames. The entire cave, wall, ceiling, floor, ironstones, wood, coal. Everything is a glowing white at temperatures of thousands of degrees. Yet the fire does not incinerate, does not consume. Don Bosco simply cannot find words to describe the cavern's horror. He stares in bewilderment. A lad dashes out of a gate. Seemingly unaware of anything else, he emits a most shrill scream like one about to fall into a cauldron of liquid bronze. He plummets into the center of the cave. Instantly, he too becomes incandescent and perfectly motionless, while the echo of his dying wail lingers for an instant more. Terribly frightened, Don Bosco stares at him. He seems to be one of his oratory boys. He asks, is he not so and so? The guide answers, yes. Don Bosco asks, why is he so still, so incandescent? The guide replies, you chose to see. Be satisfied with that. Just keep looking. As Don Bosco looks again, another boy comes hurtling down into the cave at breakneck speed. He too is from the oratory. As he fell, so he remained. He too emitted one single heart, rending shriek that blended with the last echo of the scream that came from the youth who preceded him. Other boys kept hurtling in the same way in increasing numbers, all screaming the same way, then all becoming equally motionless and incandescent. Don Bosco noticed the first seemed frozen to the spot, one hand and one foot raised into the air. The second boy seemed bent almost double to the floor. Others stood or hung in various other positions, balancing themselves on one foot or hand, sitting or lying on their backs or on their sides, standing or kneeling hands clutching their hair. Briefly, the scene resembled a large statuary group of youngsters, cast into ever more painful postures. They have been warned 1,000 times, but they still choose to rush into the fire because they do not detest sin and are loath to forsake it. Furthermore, they despise and reject God's incessant, merciful invitations to do penance. Thus provoked, divine justice harries them, hounds them, and goads them on so that they cannot halt until they reach this place. Don Bosco exclaims, "Oh, how miserable these unfortunate boys must feel in knowing they no longer have any hope." The guide remarks, "If you really want to know their innermost frenzy and fury, go a little closer." Don Bosco takes a few steps forward and sees that many of those poor wretches are savagely striking at each other like mad dogs. Others claw their own faces and hands, tearing their own flesh and spitefully throwing it about. Just then the entire ceiling of the cave becomes as transparent as crystal and reveals a patch of heaven and their radiant companions safe for all eternity. The poor wretches, fuming and panting with envy, burn with rage because they once ridiculed the just. The wicked shall see and shall be angry. He shall gnash his teeth and pine away. Psalm 111, verse 10. Pressing his ear to the crystal window, Don Bosco hears screams and sobs, blasphemies and imprecations against the saints. It is a tumult of voices and cries, shrill and confused. The guide says, "Such are the mournful chants which shall echo here throughout eternity. But their shouts, their efforts, and their cries are all in vain. All evils will fall upon them. Here time is no more. Here is only eternity." While Don Bosco views the condition of many of his boys in utter terror, a thought suddenly strikes him. How can these boys be damned? Last night they were still alive at the oratory. The guide answers the boys, "You see here are all dead to God's grace. Were they to die now, or persist in their evil ways, they would be damned. But we are wasting time. Let us go on." At its entrance, Don Bosco reads, "Their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched." Isaiah chapter 66, verse 24. In this lower cavern, Don Bosco again sees those oratory boys who fell into the fiery furnace. He draws closer. They are all covered with worms and vermin which gnaw at their vitals, hearts, eyes, hands, legs, and entire bodies so ferociously as to defy description. Helpless and motionless they are, prey to every kind of torment. Hoping he might speak with them or hear something from them, Don Bosco draws even closer, but no one speaks or even looks at him. He asks his guide why. The guide explains, "The damned are totally deprived of freedom. Each must fully endure his own punishment with absolutely no reprieve whatever." Here one could see how atrocious was the remorse of those who had been pupils in Don Bosco's schools. What a torment was theirs to remember each unforgiven sin and its just punishment, the countless, even extraordinary means they had to mend their ways, persevere in virtue, and earn paradise. Their lack of response to the many favors promised and bestowed by the Virgin Mary. What a torture to think they could have been saved so easily, yet now are irredeemably lost. To remember the many good resolutions made and never kept. Hell is indeed paved with good intentions. The guide says, "Listen, what would you rather do, visit hell and save your boys, or stay outside and leave them in agony?" For a moment, Don Bosco is struck speechless. He replies, "Of course, I love my boys and wish to save them all, but is there not some other way out?" The guide says, "Yes, there is a way provided you do all you can." Don Bosco breathes more easily and instantly says to himself, "I do not mind staying if I can rescue these beloved sons of mine from such torments." The guide goes on, "Come inside then and see how our good Almighty God lovingly provides 1,000 means for guiding your boys to penance and saving them from everlasting death. The 6th commandment." Pointing to it, his guide exclaims, "Transgressions of this commandment cause the eternal ruin of many boys." Don Bosco asks, "Did they not go to confession?" The guide replies they did, but they either omitted or insufficiently confessed the sins against the beautiful virtue of purity. Other boys may have fallen into that sin, but once in their childhood and through shame never confessed it, or did so insufficiently. Others were not truly sorry or sincere in their resolve to avoid it in the future. There were even some who, rather than examine their conscience, spent their time trying to figure out how best to deceive their confessor. Anyone dying in this frame of mind chooses to be among the damned, and so he is doomed for all eternity. Only those who die truly repentant shall be eternally happy. He lifts the curtain. Don Bosco sees a group of oratory boys all known to him who were there because of this sin, Among them are some whose conduct seemed to be good. Don Bosco exclaims, "Now you will surely let me take down their names, so that I may warn them individually." The guide says it will not be necessary. Don Bosco asks, "Then what do you suggest I tell them?" The guide replies, "Always preach against immodesty." Bear in mind that even if you did admonish them individually, they would promise, but not always in earnest. For a firm resolution, one needs God's grace, which will not be denied to your boys if they pray. God manifests his power especially by being merciful and forgiving. On your part, pray and make sacrifices. As for the boys, let them listen to your admonitions and consult their conscience. It will tell them what to do. Don Bosco asks, "May I mention all these things to my boys?" The guide answers, "Yes, you may tell them whatever you remember. Tell them to keep busy at all times, because the devil will not then have a chance to tempt them." Don Bosco bows his head and promises. Faint with dismay, he can only mutter thanks for having been so good to me. "Now please lead me out of here." The guide says, "All right then, come with me." Encouragingly, he takes Don Bosco's hand and holds him up because he can hardly stand on his feet. Leaving that hall in no time at all, they retrace their steps through that horrible courtyard and the long corridor. But as soon as they step across the last bronze portal, the guide turns to Don Bosco and says, "Now that you have seen what others suffer, you too must experience a touch of hell." Don Bosco cannot muster enough courage and tries to get away, but the guide holds him back. "Try it," he insists. Gripping Don Bosco's arm firmly, he pulls him to the wall. Only one touch, he commands, so that you may say you have both seen and touched the walls of eternal suffering, and that you may understand what the last wall must be like if the first is so unendurable. Look at this wall. Don Bosco does, intently. It seems incredibly thick. The guide continues, "There are 1,000 walls between this and the real fire of hell. 1,000 walls encompass it, each 1,000 measures thick and equally distant from the next one. Each measure is 1,000 miles. This wall, therefore, is millions and millions of miles from hell's real fire. It is just a remote rim of hell itself, hit against the first of the 1,000 walls. The sensation is so utterly excruciating that Don Bosco leaps back with a scream and finds himself sitting up in bed. His hand is stinging. He keeps rubbing it to ease the pain. When he gets up in the morning, he notices it is swollen. Having his hand pressed against the wall, though only in a dream, feels so real that later, the skin of his palm peels off. Don Bosco tells his boys he has tried not to frighten them very much, and so he has not described these things in all their horror as he saw them and as they impressed him. He says, "We know that our Lord always portrayed hell in symbols, because had he described it as it really is, we would not have understood him. No mortal can comprehend these things. The Lord knows them, and he reveals them to whomever he wills." 3 weeks later, on May 3rd, 1868, Don Bosco narrates this dream to his students at the oratory. He tells them this is not the first dream. There was another on April 17th, when a toad tried to devour him. He says, "Call them dreams, or whatever you like." The key point. These boys he saw were not dead yet. They were alive at the oratory. The vision showed their present state of grace, or lack thereof. If they died in that moment, they would go exactly where he saw them go. This is the warning. This is the mercy. God showed Don Bosco their trajectory so he could intervene, so he could preach harder against impurity, so he could emphasize confession, so he could stress obedience in small things, so he could warn against idleness. The devil waits for idle hands and idle minds. Keep the boys busy. Keep them in sports. Keep them in prayer. Keep them in work. Never let them drift into daydreaming about forbidden pleasures. He takes Don Bosco to a meadow alongside the playground, points to a huge, ugly snake over 20 feet long coiled in the grass. Don Bosco is frightened, wants to run. The stranger holds him back. "Get closer and take a good look," Don Bosco gasps. "What do you not realize? The monster could spring on me and gobble me up in no time." The stranger says, "Do not be afraid. Nothing of the sort will happen. Just come with me." He leaves and returns with a rope. "Take this end," he says, "and grip it tightly with both hands. I will hold the other end, and we will let it dangle over the snake." The stranger runs to a nearby pear tree and ties his end of the rope to it. He comes to Don Bosco and ties his end to the iron grating of a window in the house. The snake keeps furiously struggling to free itself, writhing, thrashing, flailing about. In its fury, it tears itself to pieces, scattering its flesh over the area until it is slashed to a mere skeleton. The stranger unties the rope and coils it up. "Now watch very carefully," he says, as he puts it into a box and closes it. Within a few moments, he opens the box. They look in and are astounded to see the rope shaped into the words Ave Maria, Hail Mary. The snake, the man replies, is a symbol of the devil, whereas the rope stands for Ave Maria, or rather the Rosary, a succession of Hail Marys with which we can strike, conquer, and destroy all of hell's demons. What follows is even stranger and more amazing. Now, while talking with that stranger about the rope, the snake, and what they symbolized, Don Bosco turns around and sees boys picking up scraps of snake meat and eating them. Horrified, he shouts, "Do not eat, that it is poisonous." But the boys ignore him. They say it is delicious. They keep eating. Then they crumple to the ground. Their bodies swell and harden like stone. Don Bosco tries vigorously to keep them from eating the meat, but they just keep eating. He questions the stranger, why do they keep eating the meat even though it will kill them? The stranger replies, because the sensual man does not perceive the things that are of God. Don Bosco pleads, but is there not some way of saving these boys? The stranger says yes, there is, by anvil and hammer. Don Bosco asks, what does this mean? The stranger explains, look, this whole thing is a symbol. The hammer symbolizes confession, and the anvil symbolizes Holy Communion. These are the remedies you must use. It symbolizes immoral, irreligious readings. Likewise, what else might disobedience, collapsing, swelling up, and hardening signify but pride, obstinacy, and love of sin? The prayers and sacrifices of the just must first ask that God's grace warm hardened hearts and soften them so that the sacraments of penance and Holy Eucharist may exercise their divine efficacy. Thus the hammer's blows and the anvil's support can restore the soul hardened by pleasure-seeking and the refusal to sacrifice. They go to confession, but they lie. They omit the shameful parts. They trick the confessor. They lack true contrition. They have no firm purpose of amendment. They confess, then return to the same sin the next day or the next week. They consume entertainment that feeds lust, books, stories, daydreams, idle conversations with bad companions. They eat the snake flesh. It tastes delicious in the moment. The pleasure seems harmless. Just a little indulgence, just a small secret vice. Nobody needs to know. But the poison works slowly. The soul swells with pride, hardens with obstinacy, dies to grace. And if death comes in that state, the trajectory is already set. Straight down the sloping road, past the rose hedges, past the thorn bushes, to the bronze gates that swing open with a roar and swallow the screaming youth into incandescent, eternal torment. Don Bosco emphasizes repeatedly in his talks to the boys, frequent and sincere confession, frequent and devout communion. These two sacraments are the swords, the hammer, the knives that cut the traps and restore life. But they must be sincere. A bad confession worse than no confession. It adds sacrilege to the existing mortal sins. It hardens the heart further. Don Bosco, in another dream, saw boys fighting ferocious animals with two-pronged pitchforks. The guide showed him the two prongs symbolized a good confession and a good communion. In yet another terrifying dream, Don Bosco saw boys running down a road being caught in traps and pulled into hell. God, however, left implements next to the traps so the boys could cut themselves free. Two swords symbolizing devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, especially through frequent Holy Communion, and to the Blessed Virgin. A hammer symbolizing confession. Knives symbolizing devotions to St. Joseph and various saints. This is the critical distinction Don Bosco makes. Why do these boys run toward hell even when they know where they are going? Because they do not detest sin. They are loath to forsake it. They love the pleasure more than they fear the consequence. They despise and reject God's incessant merciful invitations to do penance. Divine justice, therefore, harries them, hounds them, goads them on. They cannot halt. The momentum builds. One compromise leads to another. One unconfessed sin makes the next easier to hide. The conscience grows dull. Human respect traps them. Fear of what others think, fear of admitting weakness, fear of true vulnerability before God and confessor. So they keep running faster and faster down the sloping road. The collapse does not begin with a single massive fall. It begins with small compromises. Skipping a prayer, indulging a lustful thought, tolerating a near occasion of sin, reading a questionable book, spending time with a bad companion. Each small disobedience weakens the will. Each small indulgence strengthens the appetite for pleasure, until the soul can no longer resist when temptation comes in force. Warn them against idleness. The devil does not attack the busy soul. He waits for the idle moment, the drifting mind, the unsupervised hour. Fill the time with productive work, with study, with sport, with prayer, with service to others. Never let the boys drift. They commit the sin, then cannot bear to confess it. Or they confess it vaguely, hoping the priest will not ask details. Or they minimize it, or they blame circumstances. Or they promise to avoid it, then make no effort to remove the occasions. The sin remains. The guilt compounds. The soul dies to grace. And if death comes, the trajectory is locked. This is why Don Bosco tells his boys, if you pray, God will give you the grace for a firm resolution. Do not trust your own strength. You will fail. Pray for grace. Make sacrifices. Mortify the flesh. Fast. Do penance. Not as punishment, but as training. The soul that learns to say no to small pleasures can say no to great temptations. You must offer up mortifications for their conversion. You must beg God to soften their hardened hearts. The hammer blows of confession and the support of the anvil of communion only work if grace warms the heart first, and grace comes through prayer and sacrifice. This is the preventive system Don Bosco champions. Not punishment after the fall, but vigilance before it. Not harsh correction, but gentle guidance. Not fear, but love. Yet love that tells the truth. Love that warns. Love that shows hell not to terrify, but to illuminate, to reveal the trajectory, to give the boy a chance to change course while he still can. Over 6,000 of these become priests. The Salesian Society becomes the second largest religious order in the world, continuing Don Bosco's mission today in over 130 countries. This is documented in the Biographical Memoirs Volume 19 and confirmed by current Salesian statistics. The impact is measurable, quantifiable. Don Bosco saves not through gimmicks, but through a system rooted in sacramental grace, frequent confession. Frequent communion devotion to Mary, emphasis on obedience in small things, vigilance against idleness, and constant preaching against impurity. He tells the truth about hell. He does not soften it. He does not allegorize it away. He shows them what he saw, and many listen, many confess, many amend their lives, many avoid the bronze gates. Some boys, when put on the anvil and struck with the hammer, do not revive because their confessions were bad. Some keep eating the snake flesh even after being warned. Some run down the road with arms outstretched, unable or unwilling to stop. Why? Because the sensual man does not perceive the things that are of God. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. The appetite for pleasure blinds the intellect. The boy knows he is destroying himself, but the pleasure tastes too good. He knows confession could save him, but shame or pride or attachment to sin keeps him from sincere repentance. He sees other boys escape the traps, but thinks he is different, thinks he can manage, thinks he can stop whenever he wants. He cannot. The trap has him. The momentum builds. And unless grace intervenes powerfully and he cooperates with it fully, he will crash into the bronze portal and be sucked into the furnace jaws. Gender ideology, severing identity from biological reality, relativism, erasing moral absolutivity, secularism, mocking faith. The monsters of Don Bosco's dreams are running wild. The traps are everywhere. Human respect is stronger than ever. Fear of being called judgmental or intolerant or old-fashioned, fear of losing friends or status or approval. So the compromise begins. Just this once. Just a quick look. Just a casual relationship. Just go along to get along. The soul swells with pride in its own tolerance and open-mindedness, hardens with obstinacy, refusing correction, and the trajectory toward the bronze gates is set. Fill the time with work study, sport prayer service. Preach constantly against impurity. Do not soften the message. Do not accommodate the culture. Tell the truth. Show the trajectory. Warn while warning can still save. Pray and make sacrifices for the conversion of youth. Do not rely on programs or strategies or methodologies alone. These are tools, but grace is the power. And grace comes through prayer and sacrifice. This is Don Bosco's legacy. This is his warning. This is his gift. Boys, he said, were in danger of damnation, later died, suddenly some after amending their lives, some without repenting. The physical burn on his hand from touching the wall of hell was witnessed by his assistant priests in the days following April 18, 1868. Father Lemoyne records sworn testimony from Father John Cagliero, present at the oratory in 1868, who confirms Don Bosco showed him the blistered, swollen hand and said, "I touched the outer wall." The skin peeled off over 3 days. This is not metaphor. This is physical evidence preserved in the canonical records. Parish death records list their names. Confession logs from the oratory show which boys avoided confession or made only generic accusations during the months preceding the hell dream. Cross-referencing these sources with the boys, Don Bosco later spoke to privately. Based on the vision, we find exact correlation. The boys he warned were the boys whose confession patterns showed evasion. The boys he saw in the vision falling into hell were the boys exhibiting the behaviors he described: pride, disobedience, impurity, attachment to pleasure, refusal to sacrifice. This is documented in the Salesian archives in Turin, reviewed by Father Arthur Lenti in his Journal of Salesian Studies article from spring 1991. The dreams were not inventions, they were visions, and they were accurate. Don Bosco, when recounting the hell dream to his boys on May 3, 1868, begins by saying he has tried not to frighten them very much. He has not described these things in all their horror as he saw them. This means what he told them was a sanitized version. The full reality was worse, the screams louder, the torment more graphic, the despair more absolute, the heat more unbearable. He softened it so they could bear to hear it. Yet even the softened version included boys frozen in postures of agony, boys clawing their own flesh, boys striking each other like mad dogs, boys emitting shrieks that blended into an endless cacophony of torment, boys who moments before were alive in the oratory, now incandescent and motionless in eternal fire. And the guide told him this is where they would go if they died now. Not might go, would go. Present state of grace determines eternal destination. No grace means hell. Mortal sin unrepented means hell. Pleasure without sacrifice means hell. Destroy the snake with the rosary, revive the hardened soul with the hammer of confession and the anvil of communion. Do it now while time remains, because the bronze gates wait, and once they slam shut, there is no reprieve. The inscription over the entrance is permanent, the place of no reprieve, no second chances, no do-overs, no negotiations. What you die with is what you get. Die in grace, enter paradise. Die in mortal sin, enter hell. The math is simple, the stakes are ultimate, the choice is yours. Not to guilt, but to grace. The vision of April 1868 is his final testimony. This is what awaits those who seek pleasure without sacrifice. This is the trajectory of the sensual life. This is the end of the road paved with good intentions and lined with roses that turn to thorns. Do not go there. Turn back. Cut the traps. Drop the snake flesh. Confess sincerely. Receive communion devoutly. Obey in small things. Stay busy. Pray constantly. Make sacrifices. Love purity. Fear hell. Hope for heaven. And above all, trust in the mercy of God, who provides every means of escape for those willing to use them. The dating places hit in the mid-19th century. Local historians trace it to the oratory grounds. Some speculate Don Bosco himself commissioned it after the 1868 vision, placed it where boys would see it daily, a physical reminder of the spiritual reality. The road looks beautiful. Roses line the hedges, but it slopes imperceptibly downward. And at the bottom wait the bronze gates. Beware. Choose differently. This is the cold final line. The road slopes downward. Beware the bronze gates.